Good morning. It is a cold, rainy March morning here in Tokyo, and I honestly don't know how much more winter nonsense I can take out there. Um, but as a result, there's terrible lighting in here. I hope you can see me. Um, we had an exciting week last week. Our son graduated from elementary school with a great deal of pomp and also much circumstance. Nobody does ceremony quite like they do here in Japan, I think. It was fun and it was good. It was weirdly like every graduation ceremony I've ever been to in my entire life. And yet weirdly also somewhat more formal. I don't quite know how to describe it. It was a graduation, but it was good. And so we're on spring break now, and I don't see how spring breaky it can be with it raining and damn cold out there. But hopefully we'll get outside and go play a little bit later, later in the week. But for now, it is time for Chapter 7 of Cursed Keepsakes, and I'm going to get right to it. I hope you enjoy. Chapter 7. So, what exactly can vampires do? Jake's voice was soft, almost timid, as he carried another vase to the shelf that they had marked for the enchanted objects. I mean, I know the basics, right? Wendy went over them a little, and it's different from what we thought we knew back... His face turned bright red and took a deep breath. Vampires are born, not made, and you don't live forever, just longer than humans. And I know you have some limited mental power, right? Niko sighed. This was not what he wanted to talk about. But Jake at least showed true remorse for what he had been involved in early in the year. And he was helping sort through the boxes of things with Niko while Callum did something with the computer. Yes, that's all true. I was born a vampire, and our lifespan is around 500 years on average. And my mental abilities are fairly limited. I can't change someone's personality, or completely erase memories, or command thralls. Nothing like they present in the movies. But I can make a memory hazy, or difficult to recall, and I can influence a person's actions in the moment. Such as when I convinced Ms. Cartland to give me the list of credit card purchasers. She already wanted very much to be helpful, as I was paying her a great deal of money. I just pushed a little harder to ensure that she handed over the information she otherwise wouldn't have, to ensure a satisfied customer. Niko grimaced. I dislike using the ability. It feels dishonest in the extreme. I understand how it could have been a useful skill, once upon a time, but it is a bit like an evolutionary leftover not yet shed from the species. However, I know that there are others who disagree with me on the subject, and with practice a vampire can become quite adept at it. A lance of memory speared his heart, and he was glad that Jake was paying more attention to opening a new box, and so didn't see him flinch. A very few have honed the skill to the point that they can, for a short time, get a person to do something out of character, such as feed the vampire, or... But thankfully that is a very small number, and they are usually caught quickly and face justice. That sort of thing is not necessary. Jake frowned. Not necessary? But how do you feed then? Are there people who offer to be bitten? I have a standing order with a supplier. They source their blood from donors who are aware of our existence, yes, and also from medical blood banks. Donated blood is only medically viable for so long, and after that time it is often sold for feeding my kind. Niko sighed again. There are places a person can go to volunteer to feed a vampire in a more personal manner, and I can't say why a human would volunteer for it. Probably the thrill of the act, or some such thing. But I prefer not to go to such places. Huh. Jake picked another pan out of the kitchen box. How about super speed and strength and all those things? I am faster and stronger than humans, yes. But many paranormals can match me easily enough. Vampires are only slightly faster than elves or pixies, for example. And I have no particular skills with either ability. Any trained fighter could best me easily enough. Niko glanced over at the young elf, then gestured to the box of kitchen things he was rummaging in. What of you? Are you an enchanter to be able to pick out the spelled items so easily? I have to concentrate to tell them apart from the ordinary objects. I didn't even notice when I first walked through that house. Nah, Jake said with a shrug. My folks never bothered to teach me anything, so I don't really know. But I'm sensitive to magic, so I don't know what these things can do, but I can tell there's magic on them. Someone who knows more can come and check them out later. Wendy is sending us a witch friend of hers. I found one of them, Callum called. Found one? Niko straightened, his stomach soured at the thought of going out to find the unsuspecting humans who were on the list. That easily. This one was, Callum said. I just did a search for her name from the credit card list, and up popped a social media post about going to an estate sale and scoring some cool books in a vintage coffee pot. There are photographs of the books? Niko asked. Did they look like themselves, or the glamour that had hidden them in the library? And a coffee pot? Would that have been enchanted? Why would one enchant a coffee pot? To ensure the coffee was not too bitter? Just the pot. Looks cool, I guess. Niko peered at the screen when Callum stepped back to show them. The picture showed a pretty girl with brown hair falling softly around her shoulders, a streak of pink slyly peeking out from behind one ear as she held up a pretty blue enameled coffee pot with pink roses painted on it. That may be more antique than vintage, Niko said, but that does seem to fit with the style of many of the kitchen goods. Great! I can dig up her address and we'll head over. Get that knocked right off the list, Callum said. We don't know that anything she bought is on our list, Niko protested. And we won't know from a photo. But she mentions how old the books are and how they look really cool, so I'd bet she snagged some of the grimoires or something, Callum said, visibly trying not to glare at Niko's reluctance. Very well, Niko said, sagging a bit. This would involve tracking the young lady down and convincing her to part with the books somehow, which would no doubt involve his use of his mental powers, as Jake called them. She's not too far if she's at home. Looks like she lives with a boyfriend or something. Or did, I guess. Callum was scrolling through the girl's online posts. See, here she mentions gaining more space and being able to decorate however she wants for a change. Wow. Okay, yeah. Looks like a breakup and he moved out. Callum's eyes widened at something he read. Wow. Yeah, he sounds like a... So she tossed him out. She doesn't go into detail or anything, but I can connect those dots. It is none of our business, Niko stated, but Callum kept talking anyway. Anyone who's going to do the kind of relationship damage that would prompt someone to buy a new bed and change the locks is not the kind of person who deserves a relationship in the first place. Callum snarled. He stood abruptly and reached for his thin jacket. Niko blinked at the young elf. He thought that was a surprising attitude coming from a man willing to commit murder. As Callum shrugged his jacket onto his shoulders, his scarf slipped, and again Niko made out bruises. But now he could see they looked a great deal like fingerprints. Before he could ask about it, Callum jammed his hat on his head and turned to the door. You got your car here, Fangy, or are we taking the bus? Excuse me, I have a name, Niko protested. Yep, car? Niko growled under his breath and wondered that Wendy would think this oaf was a suitable assistant for anything other than carrying heavy objects, and that was even somewhat questionable, although he had done a decent enough job of packing up the house. He's not really that bad, Jake said softly. He's just really prickly to people he doesn't know. One would think he would know me well enough to use some basic manners at least, after trying to hunt me down like an animal. Jake shrugged and blushed again. Are you coming, or am I doing this on my own? Callum called back through the door. I shudder to think of the havoc he would wreak on the poor girl if he was alone, Niko muttered, but he did hurry after the elf. They pulled up to a nice apartment building in a pleasant enough neighborhood. Niko briefly wondered that the young woman could afford to live here on her own, but then he didn't know her circumstances, and it was rude to speculate. Well, here's the building. I didn't find an apartment number, though, Callum said. So what is your plan, then? Just wait and hope she walks by? Niko asked. Callum didn't answer right away, so Niko glanced over at him. Callum was staring at the apartment, looking thoughtful for a long moment before shrugging. Cops can stake out a place. Why not us? He asked. Probably because when a civilian does it, it's considered stalking, Niko answered dryly. A bit of a moot point, I guess. There she is. Callum nodded out the window at the woman from the photograph Niko had seen. She looked tired and not nearly so happy as she did in the post. And we still don't have a plan, Niko reminded him. Can't hurt to ask, though. Callum was already out of the car before Niko could reply. All he could do was follow. Excuse me, Callum was calling as he hurried across the street. A car horn sounded, loud and angry, as Callum dodged the traffic. Niko frowned and walked the 10 feet further down the street to where there was a crossing. 30 significantly safer seconds later, he was nearing Callum and the young woman. Yeah, I love that coffee pot, though, but if your boss is right and it's an antique, I don't want to ruin it. I thought it would make a pretty vase for flowers, she said. The books for sure. I kind of regret picking them up now. They have a really creepy vibe to them now that they're out of that library, I thought. She shook her head as if to clear it. But yeah, you can buy those off me, no worries. Here's my boss now. He knows this stuff better than I do, Callum said with a shockingly charming grin. I'm just the help, you know. The girl smiled, but it seemed forced. Hey, I'm Molly. Nice to meet you, she said, turning and holding out her hand for a shake. Your clerk here said how my post turned up when you searched for garage sales. I didn't realize that coffee pot was part of a set. Niko struggled for a moment to hide his surprise, but decided to roll with it. It was a rather clever lie, after all. Yes, well, the other pieces were put away in the back of a cupboard. I didn't realize there was a coffee pot to go with them until he found your post. It would be a wonderful thing if I could complete the set, but I understand if you don't want to part with it. I'm Niko Cooper. I run Time and Again in Lincoln Park. She sighed heavily. Why don't you come on up and look? If it really is an antique and part of your set, I'll sell it to you for what I paid. No harm, no foul. Her shoulders slumped a little further before she straightened and turned to the front door. Niko hesitated to ask, as it really was none of his business. Are you okay? Molly grimaced. Yeah, I'll get over it. She led the way into an elevator and pushed the button for the 3rd floor. I'm far from the first person to have a bad breakup, and I'm sure I won't be the last. That's why I bought the picture, actually. It was just so cheerful, and I needed the smile. I am sorry to hear that. Perhaps we can work out a trade instead of a straight sale. You could come to the store and pick something out if you like. I primarily stock cozy personal items like kitchenware and books and linens and the like. Her smile was more genuine that time. I'm down that way all the time to meet up with my friend. I'll definitely swing by, but for now I think we can settle in cash. That way neither of us will have to remember anything. Niko fished his card case from his pocket and presented her with a business card. I will look forward to seeing you. She unlocked her apartment door and they followed her in. The apartment was a mishmash of styles and colors that somehow settled into a pleasing whole, despite the large empty spaces that indicated missing items. The pot was indeed enchanted, it turned out. When she brought it out to show them, Callum caught Niko's eye and nodded slightly. The books did give off a dark aura, just as Molly had said. Niko completed the sale quickly and pulled a reusable shopping bag out of his pocket to store the items in, while Callum chatted with the young lady. I'm not sorry to see those books go, I have to admit, Molly said as she ushered them to the door. They got creepy. I thought they'd be good for taking photos, you know, like still lifes for social media. But all the pictures I took with them in the frame came out weird and I couldn't post them. I understand, Niko said, shaking her hand. Sometimes things don't work out the way we hoped. I do look forward to seeing you in my shop, though, and I am very grateful you were willing to part with this picture. I shall keep an eye out for something similar for you. Molly smiled now, bright and glowing. Thanks. I'll drop by soon. I do have some Christmas shopping left to do, after all. They said their goodbyes, and Niko led Callum back out to the street. Well, that went much better than I anticipated, Niko said as his breath puffed out ahead of him in the crisp air. Definitely, Callum agreed. The elf shivered hard and shoved his hands deep into his pockets as he could get them. But see, I told you it wouldn't hurt to ask. Niko sighed but nodded. You did. And it turned out very well today. Niko's next step stuttered before he strode across the street. Molly's ex is a dick, though. Bet he didn't learn anything from getting tossed out on his ass. And the next girl might not be savvy enough to see through his bullshit next time, he said. I might look the guy up. Point out that abusive assholes aren't cool. Niko noted both the near stumble and the subject change. As grating and awful as the boy was, Niko was beginning to wonder about him. As long as you don't start another hunt of any sort, Niko said on another sigh as he unlocked the car. Nah, Callum said as he slid into the passenger seat and grinned at Niko. I might look through those books and see if there's one about how to hex your ex, though. He was shivering in earnest now, and Niko had to wonder how the elf planned to survive January, when things got truly bitter and cold. Someone should get the boy a real coat. And gloves. No hexing anyone, Callum, Niko said, trying to make his statement sound firm. He cranked the heater up and relaxed slightly when Callum's shivers faded. I'll figure it out, Callum shrugged. Assholes like that deserve what they get. Niko glanced over at his companion and had to wonder if that attitude stemmed from the person who left the bruises under his scarf. What exactly had Wendy gotten Niko into? And that's the end of Chapter 7. Episode 7? Did we ever decide? I don't think we did. Chapter is good for now. And for now, I'm going to go get a hot cup of coffee and a blanket and snuggle up because it's cold. Stay warm. See you next week.